tercer rasgo del socialismo del siglo XXI es la democracia participativa y protagónica.
The third feature of the 21st century socialism is participatory and protagonistic democracy. This is very important because for a long period people seeing the Soviet experience thought that socialism meant a lack of democracy. Reinforcing that, Lenin spoke of dictatorship of the proletariat. But most people do not understand the Marxist concept of this dictatorship. Nevertheless, Lenin clarified that term by explaining that the bourgeois representative democracy signified democracy for the few, whereas socialism signified democracy for the broad masses. It is obvious that the elite will not agree to submit to the decision of the majority. They argued against such an idea. They talked about dictatorship. When their will is imposed, they consider it democracy. But now, when they have to submit to the will of the people, to the decision of the majority, then they call it dictatorship. The elite do not want to submit to the will of the majority. They want to impose their own will. For them, that is democracy. For us, socialism is equal to democracy. Socialism is in theory the broadest democratic system, saying that it doesn't mean that errors were not committed in the actual practice of socialism. It is clear, then, that the Marxist concept of democracy, with which I agree, is that of a white democracy. But when socialism was defeated, people said, socialism collapsed, Marxism collapsed, all collapsed, socialism is dead. That is why, in regard to that, I often quote Eduardo Galeano, the Uruguayan writer, who said, "They are inviting me to a funeral of a dead person that I do not know, because my socialism is not the one that died. They invite me to a wrong funeral." Many of us knew the limitations of democracies in existing socialism at that time, although some of us did not explain it sufficiently. We saw the limitation of that socialism, and in order not to give ammunition to the enemy, we did not speak up about that. Perhaps keeping silence was one of our errors. Now, with which kind of democracy are we dealing with? There were people who said, let us add social content to bourgeois representative democracy. You cannot have democracy if people have no food, no education, etc. That is to say, if there is not what in Spanish we call democracia social, democracy with social content. But as the Venezuelan intellectual Alfredo Maneiro, already dead, said, it is not a question of putting social content into democracy or on maintaining representative democracy and adding social content, but it concerns the transformation of democracy itself. Spaces for participation have to be created, which allows people to build the new system, and in struggling to transform their circumstances, they transform themselves, as Marx has stated. Maneiro gave an example which I think helps to clarify this idea. He said, it is quite different for a community to get a footbridge after fighting for it than it is when the paternalistic state gives them a footbridge without any struggle. I believe he must have been one of the thinkers who influenced the Venezuelan Bolivarian constitution, because the issue of protagonism is addressed there in a way which I have not seen in other constitutions. So for Maneiro, state paternalism is the contrary of what should be a socialist state.
Y yo digo que tenemos que pasar de la cultura del ciudadano o de la ciudadana que mendiga al Estado, que le pide soluciones.
We must move from a culture where citizens beg the state for solution to a culture where citizens make decisions and through struggle get results. There are two completely different cultures. Unfortunately, in our countries and in real socialism, there has been a culture of begging the state. The state is the one that solves everything and people remain with their arms folded, waiting for the state solutions. This is not the way we will build 21st century socialism, because this socialism needs to be built by the people, supported obviously by the government, by the revolutionary cultures of the government. It is the people themselves who will build this new society. Aristobulus Turis, a political leader and also the former mayor of Caracas, said when he began governing the city, "I want to move to self-government. I want the people to govern themselves." Then he realized that the people were not ready to govern themselves immediately. So he wondered, what must we do? Practice teaches him that you had to govern with the people, so that the people learn to govern themselves. The democracy we want to build is self-governed by the people, and that cannot be decreed from above. Preparing for that is necessary. And how is this preparation done? Among other things, enabling people to begin to learn how to govern themselves. How can you expect people to self-govern if they do not learn little by little how to do so? That's why a state is required, which gives initiative to the people, which allows them to build, not a controlling state, which simply gives instruction and people are soldiers who do what they are told. 21st century socialism is not built in that way.
El tema del protagonismo popular es un tema recurrente en el presidente Chávez.
The issue of popular protagonism is recurrent theme on President Chávez. Each time he speaks, he stresses this. It is very interesting to hear what President Chávez has said on the first theoretical Aló Presidente. You know, he speaks on Aló Presidente, a radio and TV program, every Sunday. He speaks at length to the people, even up to 6 hours, explaining measures which are being taken, explaining the logic of capitalism and socialist ideas, among other things. Well, on that theoretical Aló, on 11 June 2009, he quoted a letter written by Pedro Kropotkin to Lenin on the 4th March 1920. I will read you the main ideas which Chávez read and which were published in a leaflet of also. It is in the first theoretical Aló that he addressed the idea of the commune, the idea of popular protagonism, and where he said that neither the president nor the minister of commune nor any other minister should consider popular power to be his own property. He then read, without the participation of local forces, without an organization from below of the peasants and workers themselves, it is impossible to build a new life. It seems that the Soviets were going to feel precisely this function of creating an organization from below, but Russia has already become a Soviet republic in name only. The party influence over people has already destroyed the influence and constructive energy of this promising institution, the Soviets. At the present time, committee of the party and not the Soviets are leading the way in Russia, and that organization suffers the defect of all bureaucratic organization. To be able to overcome this ongoing confusion, Russia must again stimulate all the creative genius of the local forces of each community. This was what Kropotkin said.